The season finale of Dutton Ranch is almost here, and honestly, after everything that went down in episode 8, I don't think any of us are truly prepared for what's coming. Carter walking out on Beth and Rip, Hain turning his back on the Jackson family entirely, and then Beth and Rip discovering that there's a full-blown cattle stealing operation being run out of Mexico. That alone was enough to completely flip the table on where this season was heading. But now, the official trailer for the finale has dropped, and what I'm seeing in it tells me that everything we thought this show is about to get a whole lot darker and a whole lot more dangerous. So I want to break it all down for you today. Every shot, every line of dialogue, and every theory I've got on how this season is going to end. Let's get into it. So before we dive into the trailer itself, I just want to say, if you haven't caught up through episode 8 yet, there are going to be major spoilers throughout this entire video. You've been warned. Also, if you're enjoying this kind of breakdown content and you want to stay ahead of everything happening with Dutton Ranch, now would be a great time to hit that subscribe button. I put these videos out every week, and I want to make sure you don't miss the finale coverage coming after this. Okay, with that said, let's talk about this trailer. The trailer opens with what appears to be the next cattle delivery tied to the operation the Jacksons have been running through Mexico. Based on the context of what we're seeing, this is taking place roughly 2 days after the events of the penultimate episode, which is a pretty tight turnaround and tells you immediately that things are still in motion. Nothing has stopped. The wheels are still turning on whatever this operation actually is. And that's what makes it so tense, because Beth and Rip now know something is wrong, but the machine hasn't slowed down at all. We see Beth and Rip standing there, watching the cattle being brought in and counted, and then Rob Will pulls up in his truck. Now, for anyone who's been watching this season, you already know that the tension between Rip and Rob Will has been simmering since basically the first episode. And from what the trailer is showing us, that tension is finally about to completely explode. Round 2 between Rip and Rob Will looks like it's going to be vicious. And from the looks of it, Rip doesn't hold back. He goes at Rob Will hard. The exchange of dialogue here is where things get really interesting. Rip says to him, and I'm paraphrasing, that he knows Rob Will is running drugs. And Rob Will's response is something along the lines of he'd rather die than give Rip any information. To which Beth comes in and tells him he's already a dead man walking. Now that line from Beth is doing a lot of work. It's not just a threat. It's a confirmation. Beth and Rip have already made up their minds about what comes next for Rob Will. The question is just the timeline and the circumstances. But here's the more significant revelation buried inside that exchange. This isn't just about stolen cattle anymore. This trailer is confirming that the Jacksons, or at the very least people connected to the Jackson operation, are also moving narcotics. That is an entirely different level of criminal enterprise, and it reframes everything we thought we understood about what's been happening on the Dutton Ranch. Beth and Rip came in believing they were working under a legitimate cattle operation under Bueller. And slowly, layer by layer, they've been pulling back the curtain on something much more sinister underneath. Here's my read on Bueller specifically, and this is where my theory starts to deviate a little from what the show has laid out on the surface. I don't think Bueller is the top of this food chain. I actually think she's trapped. Think about everything she's said across this season about how hard things have been, how she's done whatever she had to do to keep the ranch alive, how she's tired and she wants out. That's not the language of someone who's running a cartel-level operation by choice. That's someone who got pulled into something she couldn't get out of, and now she's just trying to survive it. The narcotics angle, the stolen cattle, I think those weren't Bueller's ideas. I think those were conditions placed on her by somebody with more power and more reach. And I think that somebody is Mariano. And speaking of Mariano, the trailer gives us what I believe is a shot of him, and it looks like he's the one actually giving orders to Bueller directly. Now, the connection to Hain calling him in the previous episode makes this feel like a deliberate escalation. Hain reached out, and now Mariano is showing up in person. That's not a coincidence. That's a power play. And what makes this even more layered is the history we've been given. Mariano worked very closely with Bueller's father, and we heard Bueller say herself that she despised her father. So Mariano isn't just some business partner. He's tied to a part of her life she hates. He carries that kind of authority over her specifically because of where he came from in her story, and she listens to him in a way she wouldn't listen to anyone else. In the trailer, we hear Mariano say something directed at Bueller, essentially telling her that if she doesn't send the strangers packing, then he will. And those strangers are almost certainly Beth and Rip. They've uncovered too much. They're a liability to the operation now, and Mariano isn't the kind of person who lets liabilities walk around freely. This is going to put Bueller in an impossible position. Does she protect the people she's been working with, or does she protect herself and the deal she has with Mariano? And then we get a line from Bueller herself speaking to Beth. She says something like, "You were in a hole and so was I." Now, that line is fascinating to me because it could mean a couple of different things. It could be Bueller trying to justify everything to Beth when she's finally confronted with the truth. A way of saying, "I didn't choose this. I was cornered just like you were." Or it could be Bueller setting up a betrayal, lulling Beth into a false sense of shared understanding before she does what Mariano wants and gets rid of them. I genuinely don't know which direction it goes, and I think that ambiguity is intentional. Bueller is one of the most complicated characters this show has, and I don't think we're getting a clean read on her motives right up until the final moment. Then we get Rip's voice saying something about them coming during the dead of night, and Beth responds, "Then they're going to get us." And this is where the trailer kicks into a higher gear visually, because what follows is a rapid series of shots that tell you the finale is going to have a real action set piece at its center. We see a group of armed men moving toward Bueller's home on the ranch. We see Beth, Zach, Rip, and Azul loading up weapons and clearly preparing to go on the offensive rather than wait to be picked off. And then we see what appears to be Everett out on the porch, aiming toward the men charging in, with a line that sounds like he's saying something along the lines of, he hasn't seen his last firefight. I want to be clear, I'm interpreting this from the trailer, and the exact wording may differ slightly in the final episode. This whole sequence has the feel of a siege. Armed men coming in from the outside, the people on the ranch having to defend their position. And based on everything the trailer has laid out, this is almost certainly Mariano making good on his threat to remove the strangers himself, since Bueller apparently didn't do it on her own terms. Now, here's something else the trailer shows that I can't stop thinking about. There's a moment where we hear what sounds like Oriana screaming, the kind of scream that isn't just fear, it's reaction to seeing something devastating. Could be a body. And the theory that's sitting with me the most is that it's Rob Will's body she's stumbling across. Because here's the thing, Rob Will came into this season feeling like he might be the big antagonist, the one the whole season was building toward. But the more I watch, the more I think the show has been pivoting. The real threat, the real villain of this story, isn't Rob Will, it's Mariano. And Rob Will, who is neck deep in the narcotics side of this operation, is not someone who gets a happy ending out of that world. He's expendable. And if Oriana is seeing her father's body, that is going to be one of the most emotionally charged moments of the entire season. Now, here's one of my own theories that goes a little beyond what the trailer directly shows. And I want to flag this clearly as speculation, not confirmed information. I think the sheriff's subplot involving the weapon Hain handed over and the disappearance of Wes is going to come back in a major way in the finale. Think about it. Rip was the person who disarmed Rob Will back in episode 1 at that gas station. He handled that weapon. And he's also the person who disposed of Wes's body. If law enforcement starts digging into Wes's disappearance and they find forensic traces that connect back to Rip, he could walk out of the confrontation with the cartel only to immediately walk into legal jeopardy. Surviving the firefight doesn't mean surviving the aftermath. And that would be a very Taylor Sheridan way to close out a season. Let a character win the battle and lose the war. Another theory I want to throw out there, and this is pure speculation based on character setup and storytelling patterns, I'm worried about Azul. The show has spent time this season building up the idea that he's going to be a father. The scene where he was putting together a crib ahead of time felt like exactly the kind of scene writers use to set up tragedy. When a show takes a side character and suddenly gives them a reason to live, a future to look forward to, a family on the way, that's often a signal that they're not going to make it to see it. I genuinely don't want that to be where the show goes with him, because Azul has been one of the most genuinely likable presences this season, but everything in me is telling me that he doesn't make it out of that firefight. As for Carter, the trailer doesn't seem to put him front and center in the finale, which actually makes sense narratively. He removed himself from the situation when he left Beth and Rip. He's on the outside of everything right now. But I have a feeling he's not going to be completely absent from the finale's emotional weight. There's the Oriana thread to consider. She basically dismissed him in episode 7, questioned whether he had what it took, and if she ends up in danger or distress, which the trailer seems to suggest is possible, Carter showing up for her would be a meaningful turning point for his character. Rip said earlier in the season that it's about what you do to rebuild after you fall. The finale might be the moment Carter proves what he's made of. Whether that sends him towards something better or something darker, I genuinely can't call it right now. And let me go even further on the cartel angle for a second, because I think people might be underestimating how deep this goes. The Mexico operation isn't just a side hustle. If Mariano is heading it up, and the trailer strongly implies he has direct authority over what happens on that end, then we are talking about a full network. The stolen cattle was the visible layer, the part that Beth and Rip could trace and investigate through conventional means. But narcotics is a completely different infrastructure, different distribution channels, different players, different levels of violence used to protect it. What that means for the finale is that when armed men come to that ranch at night, they're not some ragtag group of hired hands. They're people who know what they're doing and who have done it before. And that raises the stakes of the firefight considerably, because Beth and Rip's side is going up against something far more organized than just a land dispute or a personal grudge. There's also something I want to flag about the way Bueller initially made out that Mariano was dead. She lied. And in the context of everything we now know, that lie wasn't just self-preservation. It was damage control for the whole operation. As long as Beth and Rip believed Mariano didn't exist, he could keep running things from the background without ever being exposed. But now that Hain has called him in, now that he's apparently showing up in person to deal with the problem himself, that layer of protection Bueller had built is gone. And I think that terrifies her more than anything else in this finale, because Mariano being visible means the whole arrangement is at risk of unraveling completely. In terms of who I think doesn't make it to a potential season 2, and keep in mind the show was recently renewed, so the writers are definitely planting seeds for what comes next. I'm landing on Azul and Rob Will as the most likely losses. Rob Will because his arc has essentially arrived at its logical conclusion, and the character doesn't have much road left to travel that doesn't end in violence. And Azul because the storytelling setup this season has been pointing at it in a way that's hard to ignore. What I am genuinely curious about is how the show leaves Bueller's story by the end of the finale. She's too complex a character to just resolve cleanly. If Mariano is the real power above her, and if Beth and Rip survive the firefight and are left standing on the other side of it, what does that mean for the ranch? What does that mean for her future in Season 2? She can't go back to pretending none of this happened, and Beth and Rip can't go back to treating this like a normal ranching situation. Whatever happens in this finale, the relationship between those three characters is going to look completely different on the other side of it. And here's a question the show hasn't fully answered yet. If Bueller gets out from under Mariano's thumb somehow, either because he's removed from the equation or because the operation falls apart entirely, does she become an ally to Beth and Rip in Season 2? Or does the weight of everything that's happened between them make that impossible? I'd actually love to see the show go in that direction, because Bueller working alongside rather than against Beth would be a dynamic worth watching across an entire season. The thing that excites me most about this finale is that it genuinely feels like it has the potential to be the strongest episode of the season. The penultimate episode left me wanting a bit more. It felt like it was holding back for the finale, rather than really landing on its own. But based on the trailer, episode 9 isn't holding back anything. Action, revelations, character deaths, and the kind of moments that are going to set up an entire second season worth of fallout. That's a lot to pack into one episode, but if the show can deliver on all of it, it's going to be something people are talking about for a long time. I'm going to be covering everything that happens in the finale in full as soon as it drops. So if you're not subscribed yet, please do that right now. Just hit the button below. I don't want you to miss the breakdown because that video is going to be one of the most detailed I've put out all season. And if you've got your own theories about how the finale is going to go, who lives, who dies, whether Bueller betrays Beth and Rip or finds a way to stand with them, drop them in the comments right now. I read every single one, and I genuinely love seeing where everyone else's head is at on this show. That's everything I've got on the Dutton Ranch Episode 9 trailer. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.